is that we'll take one passage of Scripture and we'll kind of share it together for about 25 minutes. One person kind of bring in the message. And today you're going to see kind of a multitude of people. We're doing something a little bit different. I've got a tie on, so some of you know that's different in and of itself. Other things, you notice there's some multiple chairs behind me. What we're going to do this morning is kind of read through kind of a Reader's Theater format the last week of Jesus' life, kind of the Passion Week, as we set up and prepare ourselves for Easter. And so there's a team of people that are kind of gathered around behind me, and we're going to read to you through kind of the Passion narrative, the last week of Jesus' life. Okay? If you want to follow along, Luke 22 through 24 is kind of the passages of Scripture that are represented. And now, for some of us, we kind of think we know the story. Right? So the mental thing to do is to sort of check off and start to go to the shopping list and start to go to whether or not Maryland's going to win tonight, hopefully, right? But try and rest in this moment, and hopefully as we kind of read together, the essence of what it means to follow Christ kind of pops. Thousands time where you're just, this is why we do this thing. And if this is a brand new story to you, I'd love to talk with you after. Again, you can find in the Bibles Luke 22 through 24. That's where you can kind of follow along and catch kind of the version of the story that we'll present in a Reader's Theater format this morning. Glad that you're here.
At that, one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests.
"What will you give me to turn him over to you?"
They offered him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he began to watch for a chance to betray Jesus. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples said to Jesus,
Where would you like us to prepare the Passover meal for you?
Go into the city, find a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near, and I'm going to celebrate Passover at your house with my disciples.
So the disciples went off, followed Jesus' instructions, and got the Passover meal ready. When evening came, Jesus sat down with the 12, and they ate their dinner. While they were eating, he said,
I tell you this, one of you here will betray me.
The disciples, of course, were horrified and said to him,
"Not me."
Is it I, Lord?
Is it I?
Is it not I?
It's not me, Master, is it?
The one who shared this dish of food with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as our sacred scripture has taught, but there will be nothing but misery for he who hands him over. That man will wish he had never been born."
At that, Judas, who was indeed planning to betray him, said,
"It's not me, Master. Is it?"
I believe you just answered your own question.
As they were eating, Jesus took some bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said,
Take this and eat. This is my body.
Then he took the cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them and said,
Take this and drink, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. But I tell you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again until the day when I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom.
When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus told them,
Scripture says, I shall strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will scatter. Just so, each of you will fall away and become deserters on account of me. But afterward I will be raised up, and I will go before you to Galilee.
Peter said to him,
Even if they all fall away because of you, I will never desert you.
If only that were true. In fact, this very night, before the rooster crows in the morning, you will deny me 3 times.
No, I won't deny you, even if it means I have to die with you.
and each of the disciples said the same. At that, Jesus led his disciples to the place called Gethsemane and said to them,
I'm going over there to pray. You sit here while I'm at prayer.
Then he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee with him, and he grew sorrowful and deeply distressed.
My soul is overwhelmed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.
He walked a little farther and finally threw himself on the ground, face down, and prayed.
Father, is there any other way? Please take this bitter cup from me. Yet, not my will, but yours be done.
Won't you take this cup from me? This fear has stolen all my sleep. If tomorrow means my death, I pray you'll save their souls with it.
When he came back to the disciples, he saw that they were asleep, and he said to Peter,
So you couldn't keep watch with me for just one short hour? Watch and pray so that you may not fall into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.
With that, Jesus returned for the second time to pray again.
Father, if there's no other way for this cup to pass without my drinking it, then not my will, but yours be done.
In this hour of doubt I see who I am is not just me. So give me strength to die myself, so love can live to tell the tale.
Again, Jesus returned to his disciples and found them asleep. They just couldn't keep their eyes open. So Jesus left them for the third time and returned to prayer, praying the same sentiments with the same words. Again, he returned to his disciples.
You are still sleeping? The time has come. The Son of Man is just about to be given over to the betrayers and the sinners. Get up, we have to be going. Look, here comes the one who's going to betray me.
There he was, Judas, one of the 12, leading a crowd of people from the chief priests and elders with swords and clubs. The chief priests and elders were right there, ready to arrest Jesus. And Judas, the one who intended to betray him, had said that he would give them a sign.
I'll greet him with a kiss, and you will know that the one I kiss is the one you should arrest.
So at once he went up to Jesus,
Greetings, teacher.
and he kissed him.
My friend, do what you have come to do.
And at that the company came and seized him. One of the men with Jesus grabbed his sword and swung toward the high priest's slave, slicing off his ear.
Put your sword back. People who live by the sword die by the sword. Surely you realize that if I called on my Father, he would send a host of angels to rescue me. But if I were to do that, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?
That's when Jesus said to the crowds,
Why did you bring these weapons, these clubs and bats? Did you think I would fight you? That I would try to dodge and escape like a common criminal? You could have arrested me any day when I was teaching the temple, but you didn't. This has all come about so that the prophecies in the sacred scripture could be fulfilled.
And at that all the disciples ran away and abandoned him.
If tomorrow means my death, I pray you'll save their souls with it. Father, let my heart be after you.
The crowd that had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest. The scribes and elders had gathered at Caiaphas's house and were waiting for Jesus to be delivered. Peter followed Jesus, though at some distance, so as not to be seen, slipped into Caiaphas's house, and attached himself to a group of servants. He sat watching, waiting to see how things would unfold. The high priest and his council of advisors first produced false evidence against Jesus. False evidence meant to justify some charge and Jesus' execution. But even though many men were willing to lie, the council couldn't come up with the evidence it wanted. Finally, 2 men stood up.
Look, he said, I can destroy God's temple and rebuild it in 3 days. What more evidence do you need?
Then Caiaphas the high priest stood up and addressed Jesus.
Aren't you going to respond to these charges? What exactly are these 2 men accusing you of?
Jesus remained silent.
Under a sacred oath before the living God, tell us plainly, are you the anointed one, the Son of God?
You have said so. I will say this. Beginning now, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God's power and glory and coming on heavenly clouds.
The high priest tore his robes and cried out,
Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. We've all just witnessed this most grievous blasphemy right here and now. What's your verdict?
He deserves to die.
Then they spit in his face and hit him. Some of them slapped him, banging him around and saying,
Well, anointed one, prophesy for us, if you can. Who hit you?
As all this was going on in Caiaphas' chamber, Peter was sitting in the courtyard with some servants. One of the servant girls came up to him.
You were with Jesus, the Galilean, weren't you?
And just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it before everyone.
Not me. I don't know what you're talking about.
He went out to stand by the gate, and as he walked past, another servant girl recognized him.
That man over there, he was with Jesus the Nazarene.
Again, just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it, swearing an oath.
I don't know him.
Peter then went to chat with a few of the servants. A little while later, some other servants approached him.
Look, we know you must be one of Jesus' followers. You speak like you are from the same area as his followers. You've got that obvious Galilean accent.
Cursing and swearing, Peter denied him again.
I do not know him.
As the exclamation left his mouth, a rooster crowed. And Peter remembered. He remembered that Jesus had looked at him with something like pity and said, This very night, before the rooster crows in the morning.
You will deny me 3 times.
And Peter went outside, sat down on the ground, and wept. Eventually, the chief priests and elders looked around and saw that it was morning. They convened a council meeting whose sole purpose was to hand down Jesus' death sentence. They tied Jesus up, took him away, and handed him over to the governor of Judea, a man called Pilate. Judas, the one who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus had been condemned and suddenly regretted what he had done. He took the silver back to the chief priests and elders and tried to return it to them.
I can't keep this money. I've sinned. I betrayed an innocent man. His blood will be on my hands.
What do we care? That's your problem.
Judas threw down the money in the temple, went off and hanged himself. The chief priests looked at the silver coins and picked them up.
You know, according to the law, we can't put these in the temple treasury because it's payment for murder.
After some deliberation, they took the money and bought a plot of land called Potter's Field. They would use it to bury foreigners and others who were unfit for a full Jewish burial. To this day, the field is called Blood Field because it was bought with blood money. And when the priests bought Potter's Field, they unwittingly fulfilled a prophecy made long ago by the prophet Jeremiah. They took 30 pieces of silver, the price set on the head of the man by the children of Israel, and they gave them for the Potter's Field as the Eternal One instructed. Jesus stood before the governor Pilate, and Pilate asked him,
Are you the king of the Jews?
So you say.
But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. So Pilate said to him,
Do you hear these accusations they are making against you?
Still, Jesus said nothing, which Pilate found rather astounding. No protest, no defense, nothing. Now the governor had a custom. During the great Jewish festival of Passover, he would allow the crowd to pick one of the condemned men, and he, Pilate, would set the man free. Just like that, gratuitous, gracious freedom. At this time, they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. When the crowd gathered, Pilate offered them a choice.
Whom do you want me to free? Barabbas or Jesus, who's called Christ?
For Pilate knew the chief priests and elders hated Jesus and had delivered him up because they envied him. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, Pilate received a message from his wife.
Distance yourself utterly from the proceedings against this righteous man. I've had a dream about him, a dream full of twisted sufferings. He's innocent, I know it, and we should have nothing to do with him.
But the chief priests and elders convinced the crowd to demand that Barabbas, not Jesus, be freed, and that Jesus be put to death. Again, Pilate said to them,
Which of these men would you have me free?
Barabbas!
Barabbas!
Then what would you have me do with this Jesus, who's called Christ?
Kill him!
To a cross!
Why? What crime has this man committed?
but they shouted all the more,
Crucify him!
Him!
Pilate saw that unless he wanted a riot on his hands, he now had to bow to their wishes. So he took a pitcher of water, stood before the crowd, and washed his hands.
You will see to this crucifixion, for this man's blood will be upon you and not upon me. I wash my hands of it.
Then the people as a whole answered,
Let his blood be upon us and on our children.
Kill him!
Crucify
Kill
him!
him!
So Pilate released Barabbas, and he had Jesus flogged and handed over to be hanged on a cross. The governor's soldiers took Jesus into a great hall, gathered a great crowd, and stripped Jesus of his clothes. They draped him in a bold scarlet cloak, the kind that soldiers sometimes wore. They gathered some thorny vines, wove them into a crown, and perched that crown upon his head. They stuck a stick in his right hand, and then they knelt before him and mocked him, saying,
Hail, King of the
Some
Jews!
king! King!
They spit on him and whipped him in the head with a stick. And when they had their fill, they pulled off the scarlet cloak, dressed him in his own simple clothes, and led him off to be crucified. As they were walking, they found a man called Simon of Cyrene and forced him to carry the cross. Eventually, they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. There they gave Jesus a drink of wine mixed with bitter herbs to numb the pain, but when he tasted it, he refused to drink it. And they nailed him to a cross. They divided the clothes off his back by drawing lots, and they sat on the ground and watched him hang. They placed a sign over his head that read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." They crucified two thieves next to him, one at his right hand and one at his left. Passers-by shouted curses and insults at Jesus, shaking their heads and saying,
You're going to destroy the temple and then rebuild it in 3 days?
Why don't you start by saving yourself?
Come down from the cross if you can, if you are God's son.
He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he's really the king of Israel, then let him come down from the cross. Then we'll believe him. He trusts in God. Well, let God save him if he's God's beloved son.
Even the thieves hanging to his right and left poured insults upon him. And then, starting at noon, the entire land became dark. It was dark for 3 hours. In the middle of the dark afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice,
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani.
which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
He's calling on Elijah.
At once, one bystander grabbed a sponge, steeped it in vinegar, stuck it on a reed, and gave Jesus the vinegar to drink. But others said,
We'll see. We'll see if Elijah's going to come and rescue him.
and then Jesus cried out loudly once more, and he breathed his last. Then Jesus cried out loudly once more, and he breathed his last. At that instant, the temple curtain was torn in half from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split in two, tombs burst open, and bodies of many sleeping holy women and men were raised to life. After Jesus' resurrection, they came out of their tombs, went into the holy city of Jerusalem, and appeared to many people. When the centurion and soldiers who had been charged with guarding Jesus felt the earthquake and saw the rocks splitting and the tombs opening, they were, of course, terrified and exclaimed,
Truly, this was God's son.
A number of women who had been devoted to Jesus and followed him from Galilee were present at Jesus' crucifixion and were watching from a distance. Mary Magdalene was there, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, as well as the mother of the sons of Zebedee. At evening time, a rich man from Arimathea arrived. His name was Joseph, and he had become a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked to be given the body of Jesus. Pilate assented and ordered his servants to turn Jesus' body over to Joseph. So Joseph took the body, wrapped Jesus in a clean sheath of white linen, and laid Jesus in his own new tomb, which he had carved from a rock. Then he rolled a great stone in front of the tomb's opening, and he went away. Mary Magdalene was there, and so was the other Mary, sitting across from the tomb. The next day, which is the day after the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went together to Pilate and said,
When Jesus was alive, he claimed that he would be raised from the dead after 3 days. So please order someone to secure the tomb for at least 3 days. Otherwise, his disciples might sneak in and steal his body away, and then claim that he has been raised from the dead. If that happens, then we would have been better off just leaving him alive.
Pilate said to them,
You have your own soldiers. Go and secure the grave.
So they went to the tomb, sealed it with a stone, and left the guard to keep watch.